You're going to use the classwork today for the nation states, but it's really more than that. This is going to cover pretty much all of the rest of the Middle Ages today. I'm going to go over. It's going to be kind of quick. So we're going to look at England first. It asks you who invaded England in 1066. This is him, William the Conqueror, aka William the Duke of Normandy. I don't think I'm going to have time to give you the good videos today. I'll probably show you the video of Joan of Arc, but what? So he claims the throne of England when he fought Harold of Wessex, who was defeated at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. That's an important date. I would put, no, you ain't got to put that. 1066, Harold was defeated by William for the crown. I got a cool video that we can't see. I won't have time for it today. I'll probably go back to it tomorrow. A little 1066 video that remember William the Conqueror beat Harold of Wessex in 1066. So what did William do to the power of the feudal lords? And this is going to lead to something else down the line. He took their power and he instituted a feudal system in which they became vassals to him. So they had to be loyal to him, and they became vassals to the king. So William increased the power of the king, and he held supreme authority. William held supreme authority. Along comes Henry II. He's known for what you would call instituting common law. All right, he had an army of paid soldiers, which is different from the feudal sort of system that William had. You know, in this case, it's like the military we have, we pay them and all that stuff. It's not like the president has families that support him. So this is more of what you see as normal. He also set up what we call the jury system. The jury system is something that's very important to us today because the belief is that the king shouldn't be able just to lock you up, that you should have a trial by your peers. Now, is that realistic? You know, our system is not perfect, but it's still pretty good. And it came from this sort of ideology right here. You know, a jury system in which people are tried by their own peers so they can look and see innocence or guilt that way. Now, I'm one that believes that, you know, there's limitations to that. I mean, if you look at like OJ had a lot of money. He probably was guilty. Who knows? I mean, kind of everybody knows. But, you know, when you have money, it's a little of a game changer, you know. But in general, yes, we say the courts are supposed to be fair. All right, common law. Why is it important? Common law is basically, you learned in civics class that one of the foundations of American government is rule of law. And the common law is kind of similar to that. It means that it would apply equally to everyone. You know, poor people should have the same sort of treatment as rich people. You know, regular people should have the same treatment as a police officer or a judge. You know, judge gets pulled over for drinking and driving. You hear this all the time. Well, they don't want to arrest him because he's the what? He's a judge. My father-in-law, when he drives certain places, he was former chief of police in Martinsville. He drives to Chapel Hill, and he's going like 95, you know, 100. And they pull him over, and he pulls out this little thing, shows his badge, which, I mean, he hasn't been a police officer in years. And they're like, oh, okay, well, you need to slow down. See you later. Me, they'd be like, get out, put your hands on the car. I'm just like, dude, how fair is that? But common law is supposed to, in reality, be like rule of law. It should apply to everyone. King John. King John was a king who made nobles pay more taxes. They didn't like this, so they forced him to sign this document called the Magna Carta. So it says, what document limited the power of King John and is the basis for the Declaration of Independence? It is this, the Magna Carta. All right, Magna Carta is known as the Great Charter, and it made the law the supreme power. It also limited the king's power, and it created this modern legislature that is in England today, and that is Parliament. So the answer to that third question is Parliament. Parliament. Am I recording this? Yeah. All right, Parliament. I need to go. Parliament. That's one of my favorite videos that hopefully we'll watch, but it's the rap battle between King John and the nobility. Rap battle. All right, so now we get to the French. The French are always interested here. Who set up the throne in France? All right, the Capetians take over, and one guy who established the French throne in Paris is this dude, Hugh Capet. So who set up the throne? It is Hugh Capet. He is part of the Capetian dynasty. Hugh Capet. All right. Capetian kings increased the power of the monarchy by appointing officials loyal to the king. All right. So now we're going to go to another set of notes to get the rest of the answers. I just cannot deal with this today. What in the world?
When do our World Hearts and Fathers reports come out?
They come out Friday. Do not tell people to shut up, please. I don't know why this won't work the way I want it to work. What is it? This won't work. All right. All right. So we talked about this on Monday. Who spoke Latin throughout the Middle Ages? It was educated people. Everyone else spoke in what we call an everyday language known as the vernacular. The vernacular language is something that if you went from place to place, it might differ. It's the same language, but it's a little bit different in different places. Just like, you know, here in the South, we say things like y'all and n'all. And, you know, you go further up north, they don't say y'all, they say you guys. In a lot of ways, it's really quite different there. You know, culturally speaking, you know, you go there, they don't know what country ham is, they don't know, you know, they don't have sweet tea, stuff like that. Just a little bit different. Romanesque form of architecture used arches, domes, low horizontal lines, heavy domed stone roof. Gothic forms of architecture used, and you can see it right here. They use these, you know, support sort of things called flying buttress, tall spires, flying buttress for support. The church was really the main focus of building architecture during the Middle Ages. Lots of churches were built. Not a lot of, like, you know, I guess what you would say, architecture based on, you know, just building a nice building or nice houses, things like that. Because remember, it's still the Middle Ages, you still have feudalism. So church was very important, but otherwise buildings weren't that great. Who wrote the Divine Comedy? This was Dante. You will not have to know that. Geoffrey Chaucer wrote Canterbury Tales, and it was written in Middle English, meaning he wrote this in the vernacular. This was not meant for like educated people. This was really meant for your average person, and it, you know, kind of poked fun at English society and church in general. Okay. Who fought in the 100 Years' War? So it asks you right there, what war was fought between England and France? It is this one, the 100 Years' War. So there's the answer to that. What war is fought against England? All right, this was fought over the throne of France and who was sitting on it. One of the more interesting things, when I was in college, I took military history. A lot of the classes I took was based on military strategy and things like that. So it's really an odd thing. You think about it most of the time. If you win most of the battles, you're supposed to win the war. But in this case, what would happen is the French were defeated in many, many battles, but they would just run away and retreat and then come back and do what? So the old saying is, he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. And so they basically would just leave, and then they would come back after they regrouped. All right, and you're going to see it in the one video I'm definitely going to show you today. You're going to see how the French were defeated, but they kept attacking the castles, and eventually they took the English and actually win this war. What type of weapons did they use? This is the first time you really see a lot of gunpowder and cannons used. And really the longbows, this was, you know how a compound bow shoots an arrow very far, longbow shoots it far and very accurately. So very good defense here when you're thinking about castles and stuff like that. But the castle becomes obsolete because now they can roll up these huge cannons and they can fire them at the bottom of the castle and essentially knock the walls down, or the wooden door, the drawbridge, they can fire it at that as well. It says, who became a unifier for France during this war? It is Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc is an interesting tale. As you can see, she's one of the, so important she gets her own trading card. And on the back it says, Joan became a hero in France. In the later phases of the 100 Years' War, the siege of Orleans ended shortly after she was sent there by Charles VII, and she engineered several other military victories, turning the tide in the long war with England. She was captured by the French, and she was burned at the stake. And the video is it's a cartoon, but it's really good at kind of explaining how they did this. Basically, Joan of Arc said that she heard voices from God telling her, kind of what to do. And then the English, once they captured her, they put her on trial for witchcraft and said she was a witch. She believes she talks to God. How could a woman defeat us? All that stuff. And really, they told her, they said, look, if you just admit that you've done these bad things, then you could live your life in prison. It doesn't say it on there. Basically, live your life in prison. You don't have to die. And burning at the stake is not like a pleasant way to, go. But eventually she is like, well, I can't do that. And eventually they do burn her at the stake. You don't have to know this for the test or anything, but it says, in England, who fought the War of the Roses, who became the King of England? So the King of England, during this time period, is going to become the Tudor dynasty. It's going to really start it. And Henry Tudor, who was a Lancaster, takes over. But the interesting thing about this is Game of Thrones, the show Game of Thrones, which is a really incredible show, is based off of the War of Roses. There's two families that fight this long war at the beginning of Game of Thrones. The York and the Lancasters. On Game of Thrones, it's the Starks and the Lannisters. So the whole Game of Thrones thing, now look, they throw in dragons and all kinds of stuff and other families, but the basis is based very loosely on the War of Roses. All right, it says, under Spain, who unified the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile into Spain and expelled the Muslims out of Europe? It is Ferdinand and Isabella. All right, and this question below there, I don't know what they're looking for, but it says, one thing you got to know about Ferdinand and Isabella, they expelled the Muslims out of Europe. One thing they did was, remember the Spanish Moors lived in Spain, and eventually when Isabella and Ferdinand take over, they sort of kick them out, and they kick out the Jews, and it really becomes a Christian, once again, sort of place under the leadership of, two Catholics. Ferdinand and Isabella is best known for doing what? Y'all should know this. I don't know. It's probably been a long time since you knew this, but remember, they're the one that financed Christopher Columbus's trip across the Atlantic. Now, the bottom one says, who was king in Spain? Who was the king while Spain began all the colonies in the Western Hemisphere? I'm assuming they want Charles V or Charles V. But it could be Philip II, who was his, I think, grandson. But we're just going to go with Charles V, and that'll be fine. Charles V. You don't need to know all this. The new Pope Clement was French and moved to France from Rome. And people didn't like this because they really thought that the French were in charge of the Roman Catholic Church. John Wycliffe is someone you'll learn about in world history too. He was a priest and teacher who attacked the wealth and the clergy and the immorality or immoral behavior of the church in general. He didn't believe in the absolute power of the Pope. People are going to start questioning the Roman Catholic Church during this time, and what it's going to lead to is the Protestant Reformation. Now, what happens to people like John Wycliffe? Well, if you go against the church, they call you a heretic, and they do what to you? They burn you alive. So this happened to a few people during this time. People were really scared to face the Inquisition and to face, what you would consider the Roman Catholic Church's wrath. Now, let me see if I can get this next setup. All right, since it's right here, let's go ahead and do the Crusades. And then we'll do Russia. So if you look at the bottom down there, 14b, you're going to look at the Crusades. Why is this doing this? There we go. All right, so one thing you got to learn about the Crusades is the nature of people during this time period. It says, who gained control of the Holy Land of Palestine in the late 1000s? What were their religion? So Muslims, the basic gist of it is Muslims take over the holy city of Jerusalem, and they close Jerusalem to Christians. And this sets off the Roman Catholic Church, and they're like, how are we going to fix this? Remember, Jerusalem is the holy city to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. All right, so which pope called for a holy war to win back the Holy Land? So what you want to put in the key events, Pope Urban. Pope Urban calls for the Crusades or a holy war to win back the Holy Land. Pope Urban. Okay, Pope Urban. Now, Pope Urban, and you live in feudal societies, he goes up to the people who are defending the kings, the nobility, the knights, and all those people, and like, hey, I need y'all to fight in this war. And they're like, can't do it. Okay, they're still loyal to, the nobility and eventually the kings, and they really don't want to fight this war for, Christianity. The crusade is a holy war, and that's what you really have to look at, a holy war to regain holy lands. So the Pope is kind of like Urban. He's like, how do I get people to fight in this war? Well, if you look at their reasoning, it's not uncommon. You find this today. When I went in the military, is anybody going in the military? No. When I went in the military, I didn't know what in the world I was doing, and probably shouldn't have joined the military. But I went 11 Bravo. I was in the infantry, and I remember, you know, they basically said I was too stupid to be anything else, which was a lie. They lied to you. But once I got out, you know, my friend offered me this job. Around 2011, I was teaching at Martinsville, and I was younger, of course. You know, it was quite a while ago. And my friend, who was older than I was at the time, was like, "Hey, man, you know, you should join Blackwater." I'm like, "So what's the deal with Blackwater?" Well, basically, some of the same things or same reasons people join Blackwater is the reasons that the peasants, and this is who really fought in the crusade. Pope Urban went to the peasants and like, "We need to fight in this crusade." They're like, "Yeah, what am I going to die for?" Well, here's the reasons they did it. So one of the things that they did it for is because the Pope goes, "If you fight in this crusade and you die, or whenever you die, you're going right to heaven." So a lot of people were like, "Well, hell, that sounds like a good deal, right? I can go to heaven, fight in this crusade. That's pretty good. What else you got?" So he's like, "When we conquer these lands, we will give you land." So remember, peasants are bound to the land. They can't really own any land. They, you know, if somebody buys that land, they're stuck on it. So they're like, "Well, that sounds good too. Get free land." And then one of the big ones is avoid paying taxes. So my friend was like, "You know, I'm in Blackwater because, you know, basically I make $250,000, $250,000 tax free." Now, if you had to pay taxes on $250,000, you're looking at maybe taking home 175. Okay, so you don't know how that, you're going to get hit with all kinds of taxes on it. Now, tax free, that's a good deal. And I almost did it until he was showing me these pictures of cars and dead people and crazy stuff he was doing. I was kind of like, I don't know about that. But this is why so many people were like, "I'm going to join the Crusades." The get out of hell free card, boom, you know, that's kind of a big deal. So what happens during the First Crusade? Crusaders actually capture Jerusalem. And, you know, the First Crusade, they really captured Jerusalem, and the Christians look like they're on, you know, I guess, pace to win this thing. One of the things, though, when you say you're going to get out of hell free, okay, you're going to go straight to heaven, is the fact that once Christians believe they're already going to heaven, that means they can do what? Yeah, they can do whatever they want. So what did they do? They killed Muslims and Jews. They killed innocent people. They raped and burned and pillaged. And the whole thought was, well, nothing can happen to me. I'm going to heaven no matter what I do. And that's going to lead to something else that happens bad. Okay? So trade, you would think that war and stuff like that would be bad for trade, but actually it was good. It expanded trade. Venice grew as a port city. And they used Muslim trading customs to really start to, you know, get a grip on how to trade efficiently. And what I mean is, you know, one of the key things to any business is paperwork. And people don't believe that, and it's like the craziest thing. But, you know, inventory. When I was at Walmart, I worked in loss prevention, and I worked in regional loss prevention. So my job was to catch people stealing. Not shoplifters, but people in the company stealing. Because you think that people outside of the company steal, well, you better believe there's more people stealing from that company that are inside, because they have access to, you know, the systems and all that stuff. And we had a guy that was a manager at the 220 store. Used to be only general merchandise. They used to not have grocery. You know, the one when you're going into Roanoke, it's over on the right, looks real nice. It's in the nice part of town. But what this manager would do, so since they didn't have grocery, they only have one manager on duty a lot of times at night. And so this manager would go to the girl at customer service and go, "Hey, I'm going to give you a 15-minute break." He would write down UPC codes. like of high valued items, he would punch in the code, hit like he returned it, boom, and then top the drawer and take cash. Right? That's a good system he had. The only problem was you have to write it down. So when we do an inventory, we scan it, we're like, well, we're supposed to have 7, PlayStation, back then it was PlayStation 2s, and we have none. So where are the 7 ones? Who's signing this paperwork like they're returned and they're not there? Well, it's one of the managers. So I was like, where's the camera here? And they're like, we got one. Doesn't work. I'm like, okay. At about 3, I knew who was doing it. I had an idea in my mind. About 3 a.m., I make sure that only the store manager is there. I go have them install my camera. The next day, I see him do it. Boom, boom. So it's not it wasn't the fact that the camera, it was the paperwork that got him. Muslims are good at inventory. They're good at trade. They're good at keeping good records. Keeping good records will bust a thief before anything else would. Okay. All right, this one you want to put, all right, Second Crusade, Louis and Conrad return without capturing Jerusalem. So this is what you want to put. Saladin was a Muslim leader. Saladin, this is under events. Okay. Saladin is a Muslim leader who recaptured Palestine, aka Jerusalem. Now, Palestine existed, and this is one of those weird things about the Crusades. So Palestine will exist until after World War II, when we give Israel what makes the nation state of Israel control over Jerusalem again, which is one of the reasons the Middle East is in such turmoil, because of the Palestinian conflict with the Israelis. But so he's a Muslim leader who recaptured Jerusalem and Damascus. And really, in one of the videos, Saladin wasn't a bad guy. Okay, he wasn't a bad guy. So that was the Second Crusade. Third Crusade, you want to put this. The Christians have a truce with Saladin, and Christians could visit the Holy Land. Okay, so there was a truce. Christians could revisit the Holy Land. All right, so the Fourth Crusade, and look, it's like so many crusades, just like, what in the world? Fourth Crusade, the Christians go really nuts. They're like, hey, I can do whatever I want. So they attack Eastern Orthodox Christians in Constantinople and what is modern day Turkey, and they kill and rape people. So the Pope is like, well, way to go. Now I have to kick you out of the church, and now you're definitely going to burn. So he went from, you're going to get out of hell free, and this is, of course, a different Pope, but now it's, oh yeah, you went and did bad things, so now you're out of the church because you attacked Christian cities. And when we say Christian cities, we're talking about Eastern Orthodox, different type of Christianity, but Constantinople, Eastern Orthodox Church. All right, it says, what are the effects? Okay. I would put for the effects, Muslims have control. Muslims have control over the holy lands of Jerusalem and Damascus. And Saladin allows Christians to visit this holy land. But, Christians don't give up. Jerusalem and Damascus. Here, let me put Jerusalem up there. You can just put that, Jerusalem. Damascus is part of it, but you'll see it on like test that way. But all right, now we get to Russia. Normally I have better notes than this, but I'm kind of piecemealing it together because of the, I left my computer at home, so. But now we're going to go to Russia. I like how it says the rise of Russia. All right, this is a more modern day look at Russia. And we'll talk about it a little bit more as we go. But here you see Moscow. And I don't see Kiev right offhand. But anyway, so Russians lived in what we consider the steppe, okay, a large plain that extends from the Carpathian Mountains, can't hardly say it, in Europe to the Ural Mountains. It is a grassy, mostly treeless, has a black fertile soil. The problem with Russian soil and soil fertility is it's kind of cold, so they have a very, short growing season or very short window to grow things, okay? Kievian Russia, Rurik was a leader of a people called the Rus. The Rus took over areas called Novgorod, and this became known as the Rus. And this is probably where the word Russia comes from, the Rus, okay? Kiev had prospered because of its location along Constantinople and the Baltic Sea. Yaroslav the Wise ruled from 1019, but all this stuff doesn't really matter that much to you. You're not going to see this on any kind of test or anything. Traders and Greek missionaries brought Christianity, and the main religion for Russia is Eastern Orthodox Christianity. As Vladimir the First, really liked the Christian church or the Eastern Orthodox Church. Okay. Social classes, you had local princes and you had nobles. It was not like the feudal system. Sometimes the boyars or the nobles would have power if the czar was like a little kid. We'll look at that in a minute. Peasants produced the crops that fed Kievian Russia. So in that sense, it was similar to feudal society. All right, but the main thing that you have to think about is Russia and the Mongols. Kievian power started to decline. The Mongols had conquered or destroyed almost every city in Kievian Russia. The Mongols controlled this area until the late 1400s. Did they just tear it up? Actually, the Mongols did some good things. They built roads, improved taxation, and improved methods of communication. But in time, the Mongol rule grew weaker. So during the 1300s, Moscow or Muscovy becomes the major Russian principality. The leader of the Orthodox Church moves to Moscow after the fall of Constantinople, and it becomes Istanbul. Moscow became more independent, and then here is your question. Who threw off the Mongol rule? It is Ivan the Great. Ivan the Great. His rule begins a long tradition of absolute monarchy. All right, so after Ivan the Great comes another Ivan. Ivan IV became ruler of Russia. One thing about him, he was really young, so the boyars were in control for many years. But he later considered himself to be, similar to the Byzantine Empire, the heir of the Roman Empire. And what they called the Russians, not really an empire, but they looked at it as the second Roman Empire, the second Byzantine Empire, or the third in that case. So he took the title of Czar, C-Z-A-R. It says, what were their leaders called? Their leaders were called czars. You will also see it as capital T-S-A-R, czar, which means Caesar, emperor, or king. All right. Sometimes Ivan's actions were really bizarre, probably because he suffered from some sort of mental illness. You know, back then, mental illness wasn't diagnosed in the same way that we would diagnose it today, right? This is a picture of Ivan, and I always look at this picture in an interesting way. Of course, it's horrible. He murders his oldest son by hitting him in the head with this staff. And what the events that led to it are kind of, you know, I guess, terrible as well, because I think that the reason his son confronted him is because he had beaten his son's wife, who was pregnant, because of something she wore maybe, and then he may have raped her or something like that. And then the son, confronted him, and then he kills his son. But to me, the painting is a picture of a man who is horrified by his actions. You know, a lot of people who suffer from things like schizophrenia or, bipolar, where, it's like an on switch, they go crazy on you, and then it's an off switch. There is no medication. People today can live very productive lives because they use medicine, but back then they had nothing that could really help him. These acts earned him the name or the nickname Ivan the Terrible. Ivan the Terrible. All right, so it asks you what church unified Russia, the Eastern Orthodox Church. So the Orthodox Church in Russia had become more independent of Constantinople. And in fact, it serves as more of the center of the Eastern Orthodox Church because where it says Constantinople, remember that in 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottomans. That's what goes there. And they renamed Constantinople what? Istanbul, which is I-S-T-A-N-B-U-L, Istanbul. They renamed Constantinople Istanbul. That should be all of your answers, right? You can go ahead and turn that in. Apologize for it being all choppy and jumping around. Russia proclaimed Moscow to be the third Rome. Whenever you look at Russian architecture, I just, you think about these domed churches, onion-shaped domes. Churches were meant to inspire all religious wonder and a mystical feeling of spirituality. And the best example is this. This is something you see on the SOL every once in a while. So it shows you this St. Basil, and it says something to the extent of, you know, what group of people or whatever is responsible for this type of architecture. It will be the Russians. It's Russian architecture. But yeah, the onion-shaped dome there. All right, why is this not working now?